areas of my life. I was chronically depressed for a number of different reasons, and when I let go of some of my pride and personal ambitions and my anger, that really changed who I was.
How do you live your faith as norm and as life?
Helping to get patience myself when things are not going so well.
What made you conclude that you have to homeschool your kids?
My second child got a disability. It's like, homeschool her. I can't do that. I can't homeschool her. This is way too hard. That was the beginning. I thought, if I'm homeschooling one, I might as well homeschool the others as well.
What's the politics of families? So it's a politics of functioning families or dysfunctioning families?
Isn't every family dysfunctional? Some more so than others.
What are the things you think are right for the majority of Australians?
My values. I'm a very opinionated person.
Welcome, Talitha. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Deb.
Could you give us briefly your background, your story so far?
My story so far, well, there's so many different bits to it. So I'm a wife and a mother. I spend my daylight hours raising children and I educate them at home. And at night I play politics and try and do some team building and some good there. So that's in very broad strokes, that's where I'm from.
And could you talk about your growing up, which part of the country?
So I grew up in Lesmurdie. I was born there, raised there, and we lived all of our lives there except for a couple of years. I'm the eldest of 5 children. My mum homeschooled all of us. She was homeschooling for 26 years. And I think that left us all with nervous tics of different kinds. But it was largely a very positive experience. I grew up in what I believed was a Christian home, but now I've come to believe it was traditional rather than Christian, with faith in Christ being not common to everybody there. It was just different people had different relationships. And everybody's walked away with a different journey from that. And I'm relatively close to most of my siblings, so that's really good. It was a very different kind of education, but certainly one that helped me to think outside the box.
That's very good. And then that's the whole idea of education, should be able to think, which is inside or outside, but at least the brain is moving. That's the whole intent. Could you talk more on your relationship to your faith?
To my faith.
And how that has evolved.
And how that has evolved. Well, I think everybody comes out of their teenage years pretty disillusioned with what they grew up with, and I don't think I was any different. I felt very uncomfortable in who I was as a person, and I felt very uncomfortable in my faith at the time as well, and I think that translated areas of my life. I was chronically depressed for a number of different reasons, and I had a crew cut with a pink, fringe across the front, and I think that was just indicative of where I was at the time. And through the years, I came to meet a number of different people who meant a lot to me, not always deep, not always long friendships, but they became very deep. And one lady in particular, she showed me that humility was something that I needed. And I had never seen humility done in a way that was flexible and gentle. I thought humility was more like a door, making yourself into a doormat. And I wanted what she had. And when I let go of some of my pride and personal ambitions and my anger, that really changed who I was in a big way. I came to an understanding, I'm a Christian, and I came to the understanding that Christ, everything who I am, what I do, everything that I do is in Christ. And I can't be something that I'm not. And that was one circumstance. Meeting this lady and talking with her was one circumstance which really changed me. And the other one was we lost a child. I had a stillborn child at 7 months into the pregnancy. And all of the anger and the hurt and everything that came out of that got swept away in all of that emotion, and we knew we would be okay through that experience. We knew that he had an incompatible with life diagnosis, and through it all we came out with the knowledge that God is good, despite what happens around you, good, and that things work together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And that made me a much nicer person. Those two experiences, both of which were born out of immense pain, I became a better person because of it.
Wow. And how do you live your faith in these days? And how does that, the intensity, you don't want the painful experiences to be reminding you of your faith, but how do you live your faith as norm and as life?
Faith is a relationship for us. It's a daily relationship, a daily choice, and that encompasses everything that we do. So for me, whether it's talking with my children or just being with them, being present in the moment with them, helping them to understand, helping to get patience myself when things are not going so well, living it just one step at a time, 1 minute at a time. Faith doesn't take away any pain. But I learned that pain doesn't kill you. You know, that grief and that heartbreak, it doesn't kill you. It makes you stronger. Not that, you know, that's a platitude that we don't like to hear, but it does make you stronger.
With that strength, and then you have 5 kids?
I've got three of my own, yeah. And you took a decision to homeschool your kids. And when was that decision, and then what were the circumstances? What made you conclude that you have to homeschool your kids? I wasn't going to homeschool. I came out of homeschooling myself with the idea that was just for nutters and crazy people. And then I became that myself. So my second child, she's got a disability, and we initially enrolled her in a education support program, and it's the best the government can offer. It's about we were told it's a $300,000 a year placement, and there was 5 teachers to 7 students, and our experiences with that were really not good. I would go so far as to label it abusive, but the government can only do so much. So we enrolled Abby in this program, and I didn't want to be one of those parents that just creates chaos wherever they go. So I asked the speech therapist to come along on an observation day and tell me what she thought. And she said, "This is terrible, pull her out right now." I was like, well, what am I going to do with her? And she's like, "Oh, homeschool her." I was like, "I can't do that. I can't homeschool her. This is way too hard." And she said, "Oh, I'll help you." And so to her credit, she did. She got me started. And that was the beginning. I thought, if I'm homeschooling one, I might as well homeschool the others as well.
Wow. And how is that experience of homeschooling and parenting marrying together?
I think it's easier if you start from the beginning. I do think that makes a big difference, because school at home is not the same as going to school. You don't do the same things, you don't have the same routines, and it's different for every family. So for us, it's changed over the years, and as they've gotten older, it's been easier to make more routines and all the rest of it, and I've gotten better at it. I used to have a meltdown at the beginning of every term, crying and say, "I can't do this, I can't do this." But every term it would get better. Incrementally it would get better. And we've really enjoyed the journey so far.
In traditional schooling and homeschooling, your kids would socialize with kids who are traditionally schooled versus homeschooled as well, as they make friends. So what do you see the differences broadly between the traditional schooling and homeschooling?
I think it depends what you make it. I mean, once upon a time, particularly in Australia, homeschooling was largely limited to white Christian families who wanted that choice, and I think a lot of our homeschool culture came from the US, but now it's very, very diverse, and people homeschool for all different reasons. There's Muslim homeschool communities, there's Christian homeschool communities, there's unschooling communities, there's all sorts out there, and they all homeschool for different reasons, whether that's religious reasons and faith, or whether it's because their child was bullying or because they were travelling. There's lots of different reasons that people homeschool now. We used to be quite isolated and insular because of Abby's disabilities. We couldn't get out and do a lot, but I know that there's co-ops where people come from several hundred kilometres to meet every Wednesday. And they've got waiting lists of 80 families long to try and get into these co-ops because they're so popular with the local homeschool communities.
Wow.
So,
could you talk more on your journey being a parent of a child with disability in terms of, the time you get to know that your child has some form of disabilities, and then from there, how has that, how's that experience and journey been for you?
that's been pretty painful, pretty painful. It started off initially, people would come up to us when she was a new baby and say, "What's wrong with your child?" And we were like, "Oh, I don't know. We're sleep deprived, she's stubborn, I don't know. Like, what is wrong with the baby? She won't sleep." And she didn't. She would sleep for 5 hours over a total of 5 hours in 3 days. And so we were chronically sleep deprived, couldn't function properly. And it was traumatic. My husband actually can't talk about it because he finds it too difficult to talk about. We knew there was something wrong, we didn't know what. And over time you learn coping mechanisms. So Abby wasn't non-verbal, but she was pretty close. So everything that she communicated was through a song or through a tune. So whether it was holding hands to cross the road or wanting a drink of water, she didn't understand what pointing was. You couldn't point to something and have her respond to that. She couldn't have a back-forward conversation. She walked very late. And everything upset her. We couldn't work out why things that were not things would upset her. And when she had a diagnosis, she was 4 when the official diagnosis came through. It was a bit of a relief because we knew that something was wrong. And from that point, we had a lot of therapies. We changed her diet, had a lot of therapies, and that made a huge difference. And to be honest, a lot of prayer as well, because she was crazy, absolutely crazy. And now you would not know her. You would not know her. When you speak with her, you can realise that she's got communication problems, but she is the calmest child in the family, and she can do everything another child can do. She will just take longer to do it. And her perseverance and her gentleness and her kindness towards others has just been really humbling to watch.
Wow. And how old is she now?
She's 11 now. Yeah.
It's been the last 7 years of doing things. Could you tell me more about how is the federal system of the disability funding has supported, and how has that supported the journey with identifying therapists, finding therapists, planning, and all of that process? How has that gone?
We managed our own funds. I found the system really quite rigid. I would have liked a bit more flexibility, and I know people who do rort the system and who do perhaps pull out more than what they should be doing, and I think it's very sad because there are people out there who actually need the funding. We spent 4 days a week in different therapy courses, which we couldn't have afforded without it, so I'm really grateful for that. However, we believe that she's got to a point now where we can manage her disabilities, and also she can learn and grow through that herself. So we actually turned off the funding. We rang them and said, "Oh, we don't want this anymore."
Oh, lovely. And what's the learning from there? As in, you have self-managing your plan, you're finding your own therapists, and then you're working with the therapist. But how is that process of identifying, working with somebody, and then saying, okay, not that working? So how is that?
I would interview them. I would interview them, and if they weren't going to come to the party, then I would find someone else. Okay.
What are the things you look for?
Someone who can connect with my daughter, because if they can't connect, how are they supposed, especially with someone's non-verbal, how are they supposed to get any progress? So there was a couple of people that I didn't connect with so well, but I could see there was a real bonding with her. So we went with them, and it did a lot of good for her.
Wow, lovely. When you introduce yourself, you use the word wife and mother. So there is I think in what you have described in your history and in raising a child and as a family, the role of a family to raise kids, and what do you see in the modern Australian society or communities, the role of families to play, and then parents, and then resilient parents to do parenting and take their responsibility?
I have a bit of a bugbear about this one. I was talking with a friend about it the other day. I think we've gone down... So a family is the core unit of society. A family is what connects all the individuals that we have in our community. And when we take out the family, we take out the very fabric of society. And I think it's a real shame the positions that are being put forward culturally, socially, politically, because all of them are undermining different roles, different norms, different aspects of the family. And I think it's a real shame because they don't realise, or perhaps they do realise and they're doing it intentionally, the damage that it's going to have on society as a whole, not just the individual families. In terms of parenting, I don't hold to the idea of child-led parenting. Children don't know when they should be going to bed. They don't know what they should be eating. They don't know that they're not a fire truck from one day to the next. So children should not be making the choices and leading the family. The parents should be doing that. And I think particularly the mother actually has a very active role to play in that. Although the mother I think would typically be regarded as the more passive parent. If you had to look at traditional parenting roles, she's the person who sets the culture of the family. She's the person who sets the tone under the headship, I believe, of the husband. And that is very powerful. If the mother has the ability to raise the children and to choose and to not be apologetic. I see a lot of apologetic parenting and it raises insecure children, and we've got generations now coming through where they've got every disability under the sun, they've got every mental health label under the sun, they are chronically ill with all sorts of mental health disorders. These are not confident children that we're seeing coming through now, and I think that's largely due to parenting.
What's the role of the education system has to play in either supporting the parents to parent well or not supporting them to parent well, and that outcomes of social anxiety, mental health disorders, more. So all those things, is that a function of what's the relation between the education systems and the parents?
Well, primarily the education systems there is to educate. However, with everything that's going on in society these days, it's got to be a two-way dance between both what the parents want, what the children need, and what the education system can deliver. So I think that's where different schools suit different types of children, whether you choose a Montessori school or public education or private education of all of its different shades. I think that it's got to be a two-way conversation, and what works for one child and one family will not work for another.
Could you outsource parenting? As in to the daycare center, to the schools, to the other support groups? Some people have to. We live in times when it's almost impossible to be a stay-at-home parent. Whether you're male or female, being a stay-at-home parent is very, very difficult, and it's becoming increasingly so. And some people need to make use of those. We have worked very, very hard in our family for me to be able to stay home. At times I still do need to go back to work to supplement the income, but I think it's best when the mother raises the children. If she's got the capacity to do so, I think that's the best. Not for every family, but in general. As you talked about the lowest common denominator of the family as a unit, which is the base of a functioning society, how do we project and then how might we project and how might we support functioning families through not just a welfare system, but through the through the community sentiments and community understanding, the social cohesion or social fabric, the norms, all those things which bring together the acceptance of, yes, family is a core unit of a society, and how do we support that system?
Well, we are the only culture that I believe at the moment that is throwing out the idea of norms and roles, gender roles in the family. Why are we doing that? Why are we throwing out traditions that have worked for centuries in favour of some new untried theory? I think it's important that we actually maintain those roles. Not that it's a rule, it doesn't have to be a rule. My husband and I are very flexible on lots of different things where he would take, he does most of the cooking in our house, for example. I'm a terrible cook. And I get to go out and do things that a lot of other women don't go out and do. But I think it's important because it gives everybody a sense of structure, it gives everybody a sense of where they fit, where they belong in the family, and not just in terms of, not just as a family as a whole, but each family is made up of individuals. My son knows that he's got particular jobs now that he does that I can't do because he's physically stronger than me, so he does them for me. And that's good and proper that he should help out in the family in that way. Now, my daughters probably won't have the strength to do all those things, at least not for many years to come. So it's all right that they don't do those roles. They do other roles to help pick up where he can't, if he's doing other things for me. So I think we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater when we say that these roles and norms are outdated, old-fashioned, part of the patriarchy, part of colonialism, or whatever you want to label it. I think we've got it wrong. I think we need to revisit that.
And what is the politics of all these isms? Because when somebody's trying to put a label on things, either you're trying to minimize the complexity of oversimplification of something a bit more complex to put a label onto it, and then so what's the politics of families? So it's a politics of functioning families or dysfunctioning families.
Isn't every family dysfunctional? Some more so than others. I think when people come out with ideas, I think they're angry at where they've come from and they set out to change it. I will never be like my mum, or I will never be like my dad, or I will do this or I won't do that. I think that's where it comes from, out of their own personal struggles and desire to change things. And in many cases they want something new and different because their situation didn't work for whatever reason. Their situation was dysfunctional and they've got pain because of that. But I don't think it's very helpful.
In functioning civil societies, what's the role of government to play to make sure the society is cohesive, the society is functioning, and then we are moving forward in the right direction, and we are fair and equitable to majority of Australians. So what's the role of the government to play in those kind of communities? Or do you think there is no role?
Well, the government does have a role because the government interacts with every area of our life in one way or another. I would like to see less government interaction, but I think the government can support families firstly economically. If the government got out of people's pockets, it would enable more people to be able to choose to stay home if they so wished and raise their children. At the moment, it's very, very difficult. If we started putting forward policies and ideas which encouraged people to have families, which promoted families, I think we would see a shift in culture. And I know that some of the European communities are starting to do that, to reverse negative birth trends and things like that. Hungary's got some tax policies which they're trialling, and I think it's time that we actually started looking at that ourselves, because once we lose our families, once we lose our birth rate, we're going downhill from there. So I think it would be really good to have a look at putting families back in the centre of policy, back in the centre of priorities, rather than trying to cater to minority groups and minority politics. It's not working.
When the politicians or the government have policies designed for when you use the word minority groups or minority politics, do you think is it really designed to cater to minorities, or is it designed to use that as a tick box to play an angle and play an agenda?
I think there's always an agenda, and the loudest voice tends to win. Now, a lot of people that I know, family people, they're very busy. They don't have the time, the resources to get involved in politics and to have a loud voice. And I think because they don't get involved, the politics doesn't stop for them. You know, it won't stop for them. So where there are loud voices, that's where the policies will head. That's where politics will head. And that shifts the culture. The changes that we see in our culture now didn't happen yesterday, they didn't happen last week. They happened 20, 30 years ago, just shifting incrementally. And our education system now is turning out Marxists, and they don't even know that they're Marxists. It's turning out people that are destroying the fabric of society without even knowing how that should look like. And I feel sad. I can't even use language that I could use growing up. I can't say, don't come the raw prawn, because nobody would understand what I mean anymore. The language we grew up with, our Australian culture, is all but disappeared, and people don't even know that it's gone.
You use an interesting term, Marxist. Could you, I think why do you think that the education system is producing more Marxists, and then what kind of conversations you're having with people to come to feel that, you know, that's the angle of the broader the education methodologies or the curriculum being trained? So what are you observing there?
Look, everybody comes out wanting to do what's good, but the greater good does not always work. So the conversations that I'm having with people, I had a very interesting time last November where I was speaking to some people, and I would have thought that their policies, their politics were fringe, but it doesn't appear that they were. They're part of a mainstream political party, and they're active members. They were actively talking about eradicating the middle class. They were talking about forced sterilisation. They were talking about removing cars, big cars off the streets. They were talking about compulsory downsizing home blocks because people can't maintain the block sizes that they've already got. And all of these are antithetical to freedom of the individual, to free will, to having a functioning society in anything except an authoritarian regime. Now, I was surprised because I thought that these ideas would be fringe at the very, they seemed pretty fringe to me, except all of the people that were there were quite open about it and were talking about it as if this was common knowledge. And I was very surprised, and I didn't say a lot because it shocked me. And I think we have come a long way when people think that acting on behalf of someone, forced sterilisation or eradicating the middle class, presumably so that the rich upper class can give themselves a pat on the back by looking after the lower classes, I presume. We've got a lot of work to do to start erasing that thinking from our culture, because that's not going to help us get anywhere positive.
What do you believe are the core Australian values, and have they thrived across the decades, and how might we support them to thrive further?
I think if you were thinking about particularly Australian values, I think the first one would come to mind is mateship, the idea of giving everybody a fair go, and standing shoulder to shoulder with people. And I think that's, comes out of the Anzac spirit and all of that, and the fact that we're a country that's made up of many, many individuals who came out here in terrible circumstances, who lived in very, very difficult conditions. And something that I noticed is when an Australian asks for help, it takes a lot for them to get to that point. If an Australian asks for help, they're at breaking point, because traditionally they don't ask for help. They are friendly, but they're not friends, you know what I mean? And I think we can do that better. In terms of values culturally that we hold, I think we love to to have free speech as a part of letting everybody have a fair go to say their piece. We love the idea of being having individual responsibility and being able to take care of yourselves. Australians always pride themselves in being able to, do it tough, get through the hard times and make it work. I don't think as a rule, or typically, until perhaps recently, I don't think we like to have handouts. And I think particularly those values underpin really what it is to be Australian. I mean, there's other values as well that would come out of, the Judeo-Christian culture and, Western civilization that we've brought in. But I think those two stand out as being particularly true for the average Australian.
Could you talk more on your, in terms of the political values you believe in, or where do you sit, and then what are the things you think are right for majority of Australians?
Well, where do I sit? I'm told that I sit far right. But perhaps, I don't know. I feel like the spectrum shifted off, the Overton window galloped off to the left there and left me as an outlier there. I don't feel like my values actually shifted at all. I think everyone should have a fair go. Everybody should be able to live and let live. But at the point that your living is infringing on someone else's rights, don't really hold with that. I love the idea of being free from religion, but being free to have religion. That's the only freedom that we get in the Constitution, is the freedom from state religion. It's not actually the freedom of religion, which is a little bit different. And my values, I'm a very opinionated person, and my husband likes to remind me of this time. I want to see a moral compass come back to politics, because what I see now is people just listening to the loudest voice, not doing anything because it's the right thing to do. And as much as I would disagree sometimes with a politician's actions, if they're doing it because they have a moral compass, I actually can respect their conscience over that. And I feel like too many of us don't have any kind of moral compass in our decisions.
Morality, that's a big one. I think and then that's the next question from there is, the term being used, from being statesman, stateswoman, and comparing that with politicians or career politicians. So on that spectrum, where do you see aspiring politicians today sit, and aspiring people who are running for office?
I see very few statesmen, very few. And I think in part that's due to the times that we live in. You've got 24/7 media coverage, you've got social media, everything that you do, no matter how small, will be made story if someone so wants it. And it's very difficult to have a statesman posture when that's what you're competing with. Again, I think that a statesman is built on a moral compass. The moral compass comes first before everything else. And when you are a leader not because people follow you, but because you're choosing what is right. When you choose what is right, when you can hold to objective truth, it's not my truth, it's not your truth, it's the truth, then I think that they can lead people and have the courage to lead through difficult and adverse circumstances. I think that makes a huge difference, because without that, the journey is too tough, and I think many politicians cave to what is the most popular or the most loud voice that's happening at the time.
So, which leads to the next one is the politics of populism, and the politics of the tick box, and having your multiple ticks being done, and pandering to specific audience of different sizes and different opinions and different angles, and how does that play, and how does that affect the the functioning of the democracy, because we call it we are a democracy, and then it should be functioning in the fashion which we want it should be. So how does that play into that as well?
I think it comes down again to the culture. Where we have a fractured culture, it's very difficult to rule to manage to rule a country using like we have a representative democracy at the moment, which works really well if you've got a society that's heading the same direction. But what we've got at the moment is a society where people are struggling all against each other, men against women, parents against children, older generation against the younger generation. There's all these different fractures, even with people internally with their own identities and things. How do you manage a culture that is so fractured that it can't walk in step? It doesn't matter which country, which time frame in history you're from, they all had cohesive values. And what we have now is the beginnings of anarchy, because nobody's walking in step. Nobody's, you can't have a populist vote in the sense of, the representative democracy is fracturing.
Across the federation, and as we talked about the term statesmen, stateswomen, across the federation history, which politicians or which personalities do you believe will fit in that box of a statesman or a stateswoman?
I like a few of the American presidents because of their ability to lead and lead through adversity. I have a lot of respect for Lincoln, for Washington and people like that. I have a lot of respect for Margaret Thatcher. I don't know that she always made the right call, but she did it, I believe, with her heart in the right place to try to make a positive difference for the people. And I think those are the personalities that we are missing. I see a lot of character politicians, I guess, where we have, you have Trump and you have Biden, and they've made caricatures of these people and their cult followings more than politicians. And I think, although there's some good to be had through those kind of, they can bring people together certainly on different issues, I think it's actually divisive in the long run. But perhaps that's more of a symptom of the culture at large.
And if you have to name a few from the Australian history of politics?
I liked the way that John Howard led. I liked the way he led. Don't always agree with him. I don't agree on some of his gun reforms that he had, but he had a way of bringing people together and became a bit of a father to the nation. And I see in some ways, I remember watching on television the journalist trotting beside him as he'd go for his morning run, and I always used to think he had them where he wanted them, and he knew that they will be out there. Yeah, he knew that they would be out there. That's right. And if they couldn't keep up, well, then they couldn't keep up. Yeah. Lovely.
So anybody else apart from John?
Not so much with Australian politics. I think we've actually. I don't think that there's as many characters here, and also we're a younger country. So I think when you can compare them to some of the standouts from other countries, I think that we've got a little bit of a way to go there.
And how does politics in Australia clearly define, or politicians on both sides, or how do they adhere to their own values? For example, somebody says that we are on the center, but do they stand, or all the policy stances they have, they are on the center, or somebody on the right says we are on the right, but do their policy stand the test whether they are on the right or on the left, either ways? So how do people differentiate the right and the left? When people say give themselves a tag as a party, but their policies might be confronted, they might not be on that same angle of the spectrum or the traditional values of that spectrum.
I don't actually agree with the terms right and left.
Okay.
I feel like right and left is not nearly nuanced enough to express where everybody is.
Yeah.
And I think even if you look at, we would say that the Socialist Party, if you take that as an example, they were nationalists, so you could say they're right, but they're socialists, so you could say they were left. So it's too nuanced to say that someone's right or left. And I think if a party has its values clearly lined out, they should make policies which uphold those values. And I think that some parties that would regard themselves as being more on the right, I think sometimes tend to be hesitant about it. They are apologetic in their attempt at leadership, and leaders are not apologetic.
In the upcoming, so the elections upcoming for the federal and the states and multiple states are, what do you want for the voters when they're thinking about their politicians and locally from the state and a federal point of view, when they are going to the polling booth, what things they should be thinking about before they cast their vote?
I think they should examine the issues that are in front of them and vote for the person. Contact all of their candidates. Pick somebody. Don't vote according to a ticket. Vote according to the conversations that you've had with those people on the issues that affect you. I hate it when people say, oh, I'm a rusted-on Labor voter, I'm a rusted-on Liberal voter. And I think that's why we have a problem in this country, is because no one's doing any thinking for themselves. Be a swing voter. Go and find the candidate that best fits what your values are. Find the candidate that best stands up for your principles and what you would like to see happen in the country. Last time we saw a lot of angry people voting, and they were voting out of emotion. There was quite a drive to just remove the incumbent. And I guess that was effective. We certainly saw a change of government and how that all played out. But go be a swing voter. Go contact them. Make your vote actually mean something.
And my concluding question for you is, how might we create an ecosystem so that we produce more statesmen, stateswomen, which add people of more moral character and merit?
Fix families. Let families grow for a start, and then introduce logic and things back into the school. Logic and critical thinking. Take away all those layers from the education system of, climate change and knowing your gender pronouns and all of these other things. Teach reading, writing, maths, logic, critical thinking, and let the kids work it out. They'll work it out.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much for having me.